It is a very big day here at the Deer Talk Now podcast. I am honored and humbled to have Dr. Deer himself, Dr. James Kroll, on the podcast with us. Doc, thanks for joining us this morning.
It's an honor to be with you.
It's been a while, and I'm glad we finally got to connect on something that we're both passionate about. And we're going to talk a lot about deer, but we're going to talk mainly about CWD. And I have to give a shout out to our friend Ted Nugent for helping bring us together for this special podcast. Yes. Okay. So, Doc, what I want to do is, if you don't know Doc, you should. He's been doing this for decades. One of the preeminent researchers and educators out there, and probably, in my opinion, the one who has been most vocal out there, especially on social media, talking about the truth, logic, and common sense about chronic disease realities, management, and strategies in America today. So what I want to start today with is, Doc, tell us, is there an illusion of CWD in America right now, as far as what the people see, what they're fed with their news feeds, the management efforts that are going on in the research?
That's a good question, and I've been thinking about that a lot and analyzing it. And after 20-something years, the public has had it. They're not buying into anything, because one of the things that I learned about hunters, working with them for 50 years, is that they're out there in the woods and they see things. And unfortunately, agencies over the years have moved further and further away from the woods. And to tell them something, and the hunters out there are not seeing it cost them an incredible amount of credibility. It's a real shame. I mean, but that's the way it is. Almost uniformly, I can't think of a single state agency that enjoys high public support. And that's a shame. I mean, it's a shame. I mean, I grew up with some of these guys. Of course, most of the ones I grew up with are dead or retired now. But this is a dedicated profession, and I've seen it go awry. And hope that the panic, we saw it initially in 2002 in Wisconsin. When they set their hair on fire and went running down the road yelling, "It's the end of deer hunting." I think I would like to give them the credit that they're genuinely concerned, and they're just going about responding to it in a bad way. But that's a long answer to your question. But basically, I can say with a great authority that the average agency and average academician in my profession now has very low credibility.
Do you think that is what the problem was when it became here east of the Mississippi? Wisconsin kind of set that bar. Has it really been just a wandering of other agencies saying, well, we really don't know what to do, so we're going to base our reactions off of what happened here when it finally gets to our state?
Yes. Unfortunately, what these guys do is they have a lot of, I've never caught them doing it, but I suspect they have the Monday morning phone call. All these agency guys have this Monday morning phone call, and here's the way we're going to play this game. And refreshingly, Illinois just put out on their CWD website, they admitted defeat. They have been used for years as the good example. They had shooters out there killing deer, and supposedly that was saving them. And now they've announced they're going to stop using short shooters and move to what we suggested in Wisconsin, is that we make testing for hunters, if they're concerned, testing more available to them. Hopefully free of charge, where if they can arrest some of these worries that people have unnecessarily, but they still have them. So it's quite a confounding thing. Here's a question I asked. We've been doing so states have been doing things for as long as 20 years. They've been doing exactly the same thing. How did it work out for you? Show me the good example. Where have we eliminated, reduced, or managed CWD? That's all I ask, is just show it to me. Show me the science, and I'll support you. It's not there. It's not there. It is the definition of lunacy. So we've got to come to reality on true science in regard to CWD.
Are we doing too much testing?
Yeah, we're spending too much money on testing. I just figured out in Texas alone, we've spent $58 million and since 2012, just doing the testing. That didn't include labor, landowner costs. I mean, and nationally, it's in the hundreds of millions of dollars that we've spent. We need to be more into targeted testing. Our recommendation in Wisconsin was that we go with a strategy to contain in the zone, but put all our efforts into finding what we call the spark outs, like the Shell Lake doe that laid on the side of the road for a week before anybody decided to test her, and use local stakeholder groups, landowners who know their deer, to help us out in it, to try to curtail the spark outs. But that never was done, and it's not being done.
Is that still the best
blanket testing?
Is that still the best reaction? Is to find those spark outs and then to try to focus on those deer populations?
What's the most feasible one? I'm not saying it is the one that will work, but it's the only one we have. It's the only tool we have, and it's the most feasible one. But the more you test, the more you find. Another thing that they've never done is there are three. CWD is a TSE, a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. Lots of mammals have, including humans. All right, there are three kinds. There is genetic, there is infective, and there's spontaneous. There's a test that every one of these scientists that have done all these Frankenstein experiments with CWD have used. It's called the Western blot test. When we find a new one, the first thing they ought to be doing is running a Western blot test to determine if it's spontaneous or not. If it's spontaneous, we have a wholly different reaction to it. But they don't do that. You ask them, did you run a Western blot? Oh, no, we don't do
that. The thing that, because I think what we get in the CWD discussion is we talk about, okay, we're testing, it's here now, it's in Tennessee, it's in Missouri, and, in Wisconsin, now we've got 20% incidence levels in that epicenter and things like that. But the fact of the matter remains, there's a lot of questions here, but I guess the first question is, and I know your answer, will CWD in your mind ever significantly impact a wild deer herd population?
I don't think so. Wisconsin has claims they have some data to show it, but their data I'm really questionable about. How can you say that you've concluded that CWD is having an effect on herd growth in one branch of the DNR, and the other branch is begging hunters to kill more and reporting that the herd is growing and that fawn crops are in the 80%? That blows my mind. I mean, those are contradictions. Which one is it? And I still don't see the evidence out there. They'll talk about mule deer in Wyoming. Well, NY tells their populations are declining. Well, I spend a lot of time in Wyoming looking around, and here's what's happened in Wyoming, especially with the mule deer. First of all, the elk mania has taken over. Every elk is 8 deer. Secondly, the Bureau of Land Management is not managing like they used to, and they're allowing all those prairie habitats to succeed into perennial grasses. Productivity's gone down. We got mountain lions out the ears. I found caves. I found caves with deer bones all around them. The mountain lions are really working pretty hard on white-tailed deer and mule deer, and especially mule deer. So we got all these factors. We may have herds that are declining, but which one is making them decline? Or is it a partnership of a lot of them? We have, in my career, my 50-year career, we've gone from almost no predators to suites of predators. We have coyotes. We have bears, which are specialized fawn predators. We have mountain lions, which the females will kill 2 deer a week. And now we got wolves. And wolves are expanding at a rapid rate. And they're one of the reasons why humans don't like wolves is they're just like us, is that they will kill for fun. And they're efficient killers. They're cleaning out Yellowstone. So we got predators. Then we got habitat deterioration. Then we got, I didn't bring up EHD, the real killer. And the EHD that's killing deer right now is an exotic form of EHD. And one biologist said publicly that it was natural. No, it's not. It came from the Caribbean. It's not what's called a resortment of a local version in Indiana, plus the 6. So we got EHD decimating deer herds. We got all of these mortality factors, and people like to hate insurance companies, and they love to throw in the accidents too. So they're certainly a mortality agent. So all those mortality agents we never had when I started my career in the 70s, and we were telling people when they said, "Do we shoot does?" we would say silly things like, "Can you get 30-06 shells in a 55-gallon drum?" Because it was stupid to have ever said that. But we said things like that because the deer herds were just blowing and going. The habitats were highly productive. The deer herds were coming back. And those were the good old days. And now we got all of these mortality factors showing up. And which one is it? Nobody can really say.
So we can't pinpoint that. So those are my main 2 questions always are, okay, so you've worked on this, you've studied this for a half a century. It's not going to, in your opinion, decimate wild white-tailed deer populations. Number 2, should we as humans be afraid of eating venison?
In 2002, I went on national television. I said, unless you could say yes to the 2 following things, this is not a problem, a significant problem. 1, will it decimate deer population? 2, can human beings catch it? The answer still to today is no. And the human thing, there's been a lot of Frankenstein experiments that have been published, and when people don't want to talk about it, I don't want to talk about it. But there are honestly people out there that are so politically enmeshed in all of this that if a human being ever contracted CWD, they would throw a cocktail party.
Yeah. Because
it would give them the final big cudgel to beat people to death, to get rid of the things that they don't like. And one of those things is hunters. It's a different wildlife management profession out there than when I started. They're not friends of hunters, a lot of those people. I'm not painting with a broad brush. There's some great guys out there, and they're still hang-ons, and they're supporting hunting. But the people making decisions are different.
Exactly, and that's to your point. If we want to compare, when we talk about human health, which you said, and I know you said it 30 years ago, is it going to decimate a deer population? No. Is it going to infect human health? Not that we're aware of. Well, we've known about scrapie since 1732. We've known about mad cow since the 70s. I know it came out in 1986, but I wrote this number down because I thought I'd forget it. Of the 1.7 billion people who have died since 1986, 232 had variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease that they attributed to mad cow. But those were cows that were being fed bone and blood meal from other cows and spine matter and things like that. But we don't throw those panics over scrapie, over mad cow, over feline prion disease, over mink prion diseases. But deer happens to be that convenient one that if we scare enough people, maybe they'll stop hunting. Is that what's at the center of this?
Absolutely. I've said many times, if I wanted to start with eliminate firearms, if I wanted to do away with hunting, what I would do is the most popular game animal out there, about 80% of people hunt deer. I would convince hunters and the general public that venison was an unwholesome food item. Once you do that, it's over. Now, when in 2002, one of the college professors at the University of Wisconsin predicted that in 20 years deer would be extinct. And he made the comment, and it's been reported many times, that deer hunting as we have known it is going to be gone. Well, I was arguing against it. Now I'm starting to say, well, maybe you've got a point, but here's the point. It's not that. It is the response to CWD that may lead to the death of deer hunting. That's a big difference.
So when somebody comes up to you and says, Doc, CWD has been found in my area for the first time, what should I do? What's your response?
Hunt deer, live your life, eat venison. There's absolutely no evidence any human beings ever come down with CWD. The University of California, Davis even found there's a barrier in human beings to CWD. However, let's back up on something. I'm thoroughly convinced and very confident in saying the government brought us this disease. A lot of people are starting to support that concept. First found in deer commingled with sheep, scrapie stuff in Colorado. You can trace the movement of the disease with government activities. Now, I'm not one of these, conspiracy theorists and all that sort of stuff, but there was some bad science that went on in the last 70 years, 50 years at least, and I think that contributed to this getting out. So, we got to remember that. Where I'm going with this, there've been a lot of experiments, one of which at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, that increased the infectivity. There was a scientist there scientists that ran CWD that was sent to them from Colorado through ferrets and gerbils, I believe it was. Gerbils are hamsters. And the first time they couldn't get the hamster or the gerbil to become infected, so they ran it through a ferret and back around and increased its virulence, I guess, and got it to infect the original target animal. What was the biosecurity there? Even if it was great, what are people doing that? Why are they doing those kinds of studies? Why are they grinding up infected brain and injecting it into the heads of deer? Why are they putting a funnel in a fawn's mouth and pouring urine and feces down the deer's throat? And doing things like that so they could say, science, I'm a scientist. I was classically trained. I don't believe anything I see, smell, hear, taste, whatever. Science to me has to be unbiased. And when you start using words in reports, scientific reports like could, might, shall, maybe, those are not scientific words. They're not in the scientific lexicon. It has to be, this was significantly positive at the 0.5 or smaller level, 0.05 smaller level. So the quality of science has really gone downhill, and I'm frustrated with it.
So in your opinion, do agencies and institutions now, do they own CWD?
Boy, they own it, especially lately. The commissions and DNR, whatever you want to call them, the political appointees that guide the game agencies, they have circumvented a lot of legislatures to get some really draconian measures lately imposed. They're doing it. They own it. And they're going to fail. And when they fail, how are they going to explain it? They're probably going to say, well, if you'd let us do all these horrible things earlier, we would have stopped it. No, they killed 172,000 white-tailed deer in southern Wisconsin in the beginning reaction to CWD. How did they work out for them? They still have CWD. it's one of those things that is just mind-boggling to me. It's illogical is too weak a word to use for it.
Deer Talk Now is brought to you by 10-point crossbows and the all-new TX 440. This compact crossbow features new twin riser technology as well as a rail-less design to provide superior accuracy. Coming in at only 28 inches long and 6.5 inches wide, the TX 440 packs a powerful punch in a compact, ergonomic design. For more information, visit 10pointcrossbows.com. From a DNR standpoint, a wildlife game agency standpoint, or a research standpoint, do we have any incentives right now to find a quote-unquote cure for CWD?
We hunters do. I'm just wondering if the agencies do. I think there's a cure on the horizon. It's going to be a costly and very difficult cure, but genetics is it. You know, the other thing I said in 2002 was I said, I have profound faith in the white-tailed deer to overcome this. I know them. I live with them. They are the most remarkable animals out there, and they will find a way. Now, the nature of CWD is not like EHD because we can see resistance building up in EHD because EHD is an acute killer, not a chronic killer. So one of the reasons why I said that CWD was not going to do that much damage to reproduction is that by the time a doe can die from CWD, she's had between 2 and 4 falls, and had the same chance of raising them as anybody else because she was asymptomatic. So that's going to be difficult for natural selection processes to work. So it's going to have to be, we're going to have to go back to what we did in the 40s, 50s, 60s, restocking deer. We're going to be looking at it. There's some really work, like Dr. Christopher Seabury has done some incredible work, and Oklahoma has really stuck their neck out. I'm gonna help them free of charge because I want them to succeed, and that's going to be a tough one. So I don't want them to think it's going to be easy. It's not, but I think there's some help there. However, there are places, Texas, where deer, I think, and some of my CWD colleagues think are innately genetically resistant to CWD. We have such a low infection rate, and we also have a low infection rate on EHD. And I was talking to Dr. Seabury the other day, and he and I both have the opinion that resistance to EHD and CWD may be linked in some crazy way. But that's where we ought to be putting all our efforts and studies, is looking for solutions that honestly work. And curing cancer is cutting the cancer out ever really worked to cure cancer among the population? No. But some of the things they're doing now with genetics and things like that, we need to be looking at it. It's be thinking with new eyes. But we've got a research establishment. There's $73 million out there to be taken, already taken, that to support. And God knows how many $100 million that are out there also. There's an entire establishment and industry that's been built around CWD. There are young scientists who made a career now, are older scientists studying this and studying it to death and cramming things down deer throats and saying, oh, look, we got 2% of them to come down with CWD, so it's possible.
We just had Dr. Seabury on the podcast. We were just recorded it last week. He did explain some of those things about the genetics and how Oklahoma is actually kind of cutting edge in that regard. Tell us about Texas, because that's your home state, and that's where a lot of your fight, I see a lot of your posts, is happening right now. What is the state of CWD management in Texas, and what are some of the hurdles that you're fighting?
Well, they've taken the same approach that most states have taken. First of all, they're beating up deer breeders. you can hate deer breeders, you can love deer breeders. You know, I get all kinds of comments about deer breeders, uh, but they didn't bring us CWD. I mean, I could accuse them of all kinds of things, but I can't accuse them of bringing us CWD. They were in Texas when CWD showed up. It was not in deer breeders; it was in free range deer. And ironically, it was in an area that traditionally had been one of the biggest sheep and goat raising areas in the history of the state of Texas. So there's a big smoking gun right there. Uh, but we have a very low infection rate. We've tested, gosh, like 400,000 deer, deer since 2012, and we have a very low infection rate, even among deer breeders. And they, it's really not a problem, but they act like it's a problem. It's a huge problem. I asked the guy in charge of the deer disease program. I said, "Can you show me the documented necropsy data or data of a deer, a white-tailed deer that has died from CWD in the state of Texas?" And he said, "Yes." 54 days later, 54 days of emails, I never got an answer. And what if there's one? So it's an inconsequential disease in the state of Texas, but it is, again, it's the cut of a joke. They got a new. Texas was the birthplace of deer management, mainly because we had such a high private landowner base, and private landowners developed all these things. And Texas Parks and Wildlife was always very supportive and encouraging of private landowner management. Now we got a whole new generation of people in there, and they're just like other states. They don't like private ownership. Not talking about private ownership of deer. I'm talking about private land management. And that this is their way of beating them up. Yeah. And then of course when you add in the much hated deer breeders, they've really beaten them up. They've actually brought them. They publicly said their goal was to eliminate deer breeding in Texas. And they went from about 2,000 deer breeders to about 400 or 500 deer breeders right now. But the thing that really scares them is the deer breeders figured this out real quick, and they very, very quickly started testing their deer for DNA and culling the susceptible ones. And my prediction is in the next 2 or 3 years, the deer breeders are going to be almost clean of CWD, just like the sheep herders did. It's nothing new. They modeled it after what sheep herders did with scrapie. And that was, to cull their herds and test and use genetics to resolve the problem that they had with scrapie in sheep, which is probably the source of disease for CWD.
Which is fascinating. It's interesting that the Texas deer breeders are that far ahead of the curve that they're working on it before people are even knocking at their door. Let me get you to answer just a couple of these quick hitters, and then I want to turn the topic to another subject on CWD. We did talk about this a little bit, but what are your feelings about mass eradication efforts surrounding CWD?
Lunacy. Impossible. First of all, it's not a density-dependent disease. It's a frequency-dependent disease. You don't eliminate a frequency-dependent disease with wholesale depopulations. And when you do, you're still contaminated. So what good have you done?
What are your thoughts on baiting and feeding bans to help control CWD?
Well, back to science again. I'm not saying that feeding or baiting does not spread CWD, but there's not a single scientific study that documents the spreading of CWD by either one of those activities. There's not. I'm not saying it's not possible, but there's not. You look it up. I mean, I've looked at all the literature. There are those force feeding things, and you pin them up and do unnatural things, and some of them become infected. As a matter of fact, one of the early studies, one of the original discoverers of CWD, was that they put naive deer into pens that had a deer that had died from CWD in it, a pen that had housed a CWD infected deer. And I forget what the third one was, but it was something like that. I think it was, they had the carcass, they had that. Oh, and one that was alive that was infected. And they put deer in there, naive deer. A small percentage of those deer contracted CWD. It was one of the early studies. So deer are pretty resistant to CWD, and it takes a lot of exposure, hence the frequency dependence. It takes a lot of exposures for it even to infect them. So there really is no peer-reviewed good science that showed that CWD was transmitted by feeding or baiting, either one. Now I might add in another one, and one that really chokes me up is they used it as a again a cudgel to get rid of using deer scent. Now I don't use deer scent; it doesn't work. But you want to sell it, go ahead. The peer-reviewed science says it takes over 30,000 gallons of urine to have an infective dose. So, but there's still states that have banned using deer urine.
That was a point I've made a lot, is 30,000 gallons of infected urine, by the way, injected into a deer to get a dose. So, but then the people who champion such regulations say, well, at least we're doing something to fight CWD. What's your response to that? When they say, well, these feeding bans and urine bans and mass eradication, that helps us fight CWD.
Where's the scientific evidence that it has? It's not just yesterday now. We've got since 2002. We've got 23 years. Where's the evidence? If you show it to me, by golly, I'll be. Look, as a scientist, objective scientist, if it were different, if the truth were on the other side, I would be one of the guys leading the fight. Because I have no real dog in the fight except science and that white-tailed deer, which I love dearly. And how many, I hate to use the animal rights term of innocent, but how many innocent deer have died in the last 23 years? For what purpose? When they went in there and had that special season in Wisconsin, when people were bringing in spotted fawns, why? What was that all about? That was sheer panic, is what it was. And saying that we have to do something. Really? Do you have to do something that is stupid, that is panicked and ill thought out? No.
Okay, a couple quotes for you, Doc. One is from Texas. One is, and I'm not bringing these up to rip on anybody in particular, but one is from the Theodore Roosevelt Conservation Partnership. Their quote is, CWD is the biggest threat to the future of deer hunting. And the Texas Park and Wildlife quote from their mission statement is, if not managed, CWD can have a devastating long-term effect on Texas's beloved white-tailed deer and mule deer populations. What are your responses to such quotes like that?
I'll work backwards. There's that word again, can. Can, could. So we're gonna get you to support us in a hugely draconian activity on a possibility. But what is that possibility? Okay. Then the first one that you said, the Roosevelt bunch, poor Teddy. The problem is, yes, it could lead, like I said earlier, lead to the end of CWD. Could be the end of deer hunting, but not because of the disease, because of what they've done to it. What they've done to it. But we lost 12% of our hunters in Wisconsin those first years. Mom was standing on the porch. Dad was coming up the porch with his deer, and she said, "You ain't bringing that venison in here and kill my kids." The 3 respected outdoor magazines published articles that just said that 3 men had died from CWD, eating CWD tainted meat. It turned out that was not the truth. Not the truth at all. And what impact did that have? And we've got we've got conservation organizations that are just jumping all over this. Of course, you got a question. I've looked at some of those nonprofit tax reports, and I can see why. There's one well-known one. The top three administrators make together about $600,000 a year.
I know that. I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, and good old Whitetails Unlimited, they don't even pay their leaders. I like them. They're interesting. Yeah.
We'll put that
So-
link. We'll put that link in the comment. But there is a website where you guys can look at all this. And I'm not picking on anybody in particular. I don't want anybody to get all bent out of shape. But I have to ask the questions as well. If there's money to be made, and there's money to be made by not solving a problem, guess what? If there's grants out there to be had, aren't they going to keep coming up with research projects that are, oh, that's kind of interesting, but it's not really solving anything?
The two greatest corruptors of human beings are power and greed. This is what's involved in this, power and greed. They give the power. And as we saw in 2021, an emergency, can sure fuel some giving up rights and power. And that's certainly happening to the landowners, especially in a state like Texas, where landowners have had a lot of say in how the deer were managed on their land.
Okay, well, one more last question for you, Doc. I think I've run through them all, but I know our time's running short here. We talked about the dollars. We talked about, following the money. We talked about the real and feigned threats of CWD. I wanted to touch for a minute on just coming back to hunters. Well, two things. Why are hunters villainized in this arena? Why are hunters the ones, if this is Rome on fire, why are hunters the ones that are like, hey, this is your problem to fix it, when this is a natural resource that we all own?
Exactly right. Yeah, they don't want to give hunters any authority until something like this happens, and they're going, why aren't you doing something about it? Yeah. Well, what are they doing about it? They're just taking advantage of it. You guarantee that they're just taking advantage of it.
I mean, it's a public resource. Somebody paid $10,000 an acre to have some hunting land. By the way, you should kill all the deer that are on that property for the benefit of the herd. Doesn't make any sense, does it?
Doesn't make any sense, none whatsoever. Especially when if the person comes back and say, okay, if I do, what will I get back for it?
Nothing.
Nothing. You get nothing back.
Not even a hearty handshake or job well done or anything like that.
No job well done, I guarantee you.
Okay, to play devil's advocate, and this is my last question. If CWD is such a problem, and if some of these conservation organizations are so concerned about the disease, this is a terrible disease that could affect deer populations, blah, 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 why does anyone still adhere to the mere concept of antler restrictions or QDM or anything like that anywhere where deer are populated?
That's a good question. That was one of those things that they want to get rid of. State agencies have hated antler restrictions from day one. I was part of the original stuff. We at North American Whitetail, we put up the money for the original study in Dooley County, Georgia, and the agency hated it, and they still do hate it. They're still tied up with traditional deer management. There's venison in every pot, a happy hunter, field tag, so forth. Antler restrictions are not trophy management. They are age management. And I've always been, and I will always be, a supporter of what I call a natural deer herd. It's what we need. And this is where hunters need some blame, is that we need to manage for natural deer herds. A natural deer herd is one that exists in a habitat that will support it and has a normal age structure and sex ratio. God meant for whitetail deer to have a 1 to 1.5 to 2 sex ratio. God meant for the vast majority of the breeding to be done by older bucks. It makes sense. It all makes sense. So it's not about trophies. Trophies is the benefit, is the side benefit. That it's the little hook that we use to get hunters to support letting bucks get older. And I've worked in places where if you find a 2-year-old buck, you have really found a diamond. And there are guys, I once knew a guy that had hunted on his hunting club for 50 years. And his claim to fame was he killed 2 bucks every opening weekend for 50 years. I was there for 14 of them, and it was 28 yearling bucks. Yeah. Don't they get tired of that? But you still find, especially in the lake states, you find lunatics that by golly, you just wanting to grow trophies and all that sort of stuff. You can't eat antlers or horns, as they say.
It's exactly right.
We had not to keep you, but an anecdote thing I had years ago. We started allowing doe harvest in East Texas. We had a hearing. These 3 guys came and they were hot. They were mad. They appointed a spokesman. He got up there and he said, I'm against this doe killing. We've killed all the deer. All we see anymore is tracks. And everybody looked at him like, Bob, I don't think I'd have said that. All we see anymore is tracks.
Something was making those tracks, yeah.
Something was making those tracks, yeah.
And it was a deer that he wouldn't be able to hunt. Well, Doc, thank you so much. I want everybody to, I know you have your Facebook page is relatively easy to find, Dr. Deer. What about your website? Where can people find you there?
Dr. Deer at drdeer.com.
All right.
Or just drdeer.com. Yeah, just drdeer.com. DRDER.com. Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I very much appreciate your time this morning.
Thanks for what you guys are doing. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Same here. Absolutely. Okay, for Dr. Deer, James Kroll, check out his Facebook page, guys. He has stuff on there every single day that will open your eyes and actually cause you to think a little bit more about this animal that we all love to pursue and just watch, the white-tailed deer. For James Kroll, I am Dan Schmidt. Thank you for joining us. We'll catch you next Thursday for another episode of Deer Talk Now. The Deer Talk Now podcast is brought to you by Mossberg, Wildlife Research Center, Traditions Firearms, Outdoor Edge Knives, Hoyt Archery, and 10 Point Crossbows.